A couple of the first videos on this channel were about transmitters. A lot has changed since those were published. Let's take a look at some of the key things you'll want to be aware of when choosing your first or follow-on radio system. When those first videos were done, 3-channel radios were not uncommon for beginners, and computer radios were reserved for more advanced modelers, or at least modelers with deeper pockets, as they were fairly expensive. Nearly all new radios transmitted in the 72 megahertz range and came built to transmit on one channel. Oh, the good old days. Now it's nearly impossible to find a 3-channel radio except at swap meets. Computer radios are very reasonably priced, and 2.4 gigahertz is the rule as far as frequency is concerned. So, with this changing landscape, let's look at a couple of things you'll want to consider when choosing a new RC transmitter. Unless you're planning on getting a used radio or have a hand-me-down radio in mind, you'll be looking at a 2.4 gigahertz radio. 72s are fast becoming dinosaurs, so we won't spend any time on frequency selection. You'll be getting a 2.4. RC transmitters can be categorized several different ways. We're going to start with drawing some comparisons between what are generally termed basic and computer radios. As you'd expect, basic radios are just that, basic. They are normally limited to 6 or fewer channels and have mechanical switches for selecting things like servo direction, what type of wing and elevon mixing you'll be using. Some basic radios may also use a wheel type switch to adjust the trim setting for the 4 primary channels. Others have digital trim switches where the trim button is pushed up or down and it returns to the center position. Basic radios can be used with more than one model, but the trim and servo direction switches will have to be configured for each model separately. If you plan on just dabbling in the hobby or aren't certain that flying model airplanes will be something that you'll like to do, getting a low-priced basic radio can be a good choice. Just know that if you do find you enjoy flying model aircraft, you'll soon outgrow it. The next step up in radio transmitters is the computer radio. As the name suggests, the computer radio uses a computer chip to control the various functions of the transmitter. That also means you'll be able to fine-tune things that aren't even available on a basic radio. For example, instead of moving a mechanical switch on the transmitter to reverse the servo direction, you'll simply change it in a programming window. You'll also be able to set what is called dual rates. With the flip of a switch on your transmitter, you'll be able to limit the throws of your model's flight controls. For example, if you have a very aerobatic model, you may choose to fly it with low rates until you get more comfortable flying it. You can also set what is called expo. By adjusting this variable, you'll be able to make the stick either more or less sensitive near the center. Again, as an example, you may want to dial in some expo to make the plane less responsive to the initial stick movements. On the other hand, you may want even small inputs to impact the airplane. In that case, you dial in opposite expo to make the stick super sensitive. Computer radios will also allow you to program various channel mixes and to assign the switches on the radio specific functions. Channel mixes allow for such things as automatically adding rudder when the ailerons are moved, or adding nose up or down elevator when the flaps are deployed. Switch assignments allow you to choose what the transmitter switch will do, things like operate the flaps or trigger a bomb drop mechanism. Computer radios will also allow you to store the various settings for each model. That way, you can have several models programmed into your transmitter. It's not unusual for radios to allow hundreds of models to be stored in memory. These examples represent just a sample of the variables a computer radio will allow you to specify. The price differential between basic and computer radios used to be considerable. With the popularity of computer radios, the costs have come down, and now an entry-level computer radio costs only about $30 to $40 more than a basic model. The difference gets even smaller when considering radios from non-brand name suppliers. The next big consideration you'll need to take into account is the number of channels your radio will control. In this context, channel doesn't refer to the frequency the transmitter transmits on. Rather, it refers to the number of functions your model can have. A 4-channel radio controls throttle, ailerons, rudder, and elevator. 4-channel radios used to be the standard, but are now hard to find. It seems the lowest channel count has moved up from 4 to 6. The good news is that the cost of the low-end transmitters are about the same, even though they have more capability. Most modelers would agree that a new minimum channels that a transmitter should control is 6. While there are still quite a few basic 4-channel models out there, there are also an increasing number of models requiring 6 or more channels to operate all of their components. There are lots of inexpensive electric foam warbirds that use 6 or 7 channels. For example, the plane will need a channel for the throttle, elevator, rudder, ailerons, gear, flaps. That's 6. If you want to make use of differential aileron controls, you'll need 2 aileron channels. That would make it 7. You need to give that some thought. There's nothing more frustrating than having a new 6-channel radio for a month and then falling in love with a plane that needs 7. Different brands use different electronic schemes to communicate with their receivers. That means, with few exceptions, the receivers are brand specific. When choosing your radio system, you'll need to consider the cost of the receivers that will work with your chosen transmitter. This can get a little tricky. Most brands have their associated line of receivers with a variety of channel numbers. As you'd guess, receivers with more channels cost more. You can easily use a 6-channel transmitter with a 4-channel receiver. Same with an 8-channel receiver. In the one case, you'd have 2 unused transmitter channels, and in the other, you'd have 2 unused receiver channels. No big deal. However, you'll want to match the receiver to the model using only the number of required channels to keep the cost down. Name brand receivers can be expensive. You'll want to decide early on whether your modeling hobby will be focused on just a few larger expensive models or lots of inexpensive models filling your hangar. If you think you'd like a bunch of inexpensive models for all the variety, you'll want to choose a transmitter brand with reasonably priced receivers or with inexpensive third-party receivers to keep the costs down. It can be a bit hard to swallow the idea that you've got a $150 receiver in a $130 model. If your goal is to keep costs down, the Tactic brand from Tower Hobbies offers reasonably priced transmitters and receivers. Spectrum transmitters can be used with inexpensive third-party receivers from Orange and Lemon. I'm not sure where all that citrus theme came from. Any of the major brands' frequency hopping technologies will give you a good connection with your model. Much of your choice of transmitter brand will likely include how the transmitter feels when you hold it. You'll also likely be a bit influenced by fellow modelers at your flying field. In most cases, the differences between name brands are going to be minor, and things like the cost of the peripherals will play a big role. As you get ready to get your first transmitter or to upgrade to one with more channels, spend some time in the message boards or message threads over on RC Groups or RC Universe to see what others are saying about the brands you're considering. Some of the off-brand, inexpensive systems are developing quite a following, so you may want to include some of those in your search. Comments in the message threads may help you decide. If you'd like a deeper dive into this topic, consider my book called RC Ground School. It covers this topic more deeply as well as a number of other topics of interest to new RC modelers. It's available on Amazon.com in either paperback or Kindle editions. Well, that's it for this topic. If you found the information helpful, click the thumbs up for this video, and if you're not already a subscriber to the RC Planeviews channel, click subscribe. Until next time, happy modeling.